Mr. Sethna, I wonder if I can ask you first to recall the days of the Geneva conferences. Can you tell me what the atmosphere was like at those conferences?
Oh, the first one was very, very exciting. It was the first time, all this information on nuclear energy had come out under the auspices of the United Nations. And quite a few papers which were read were quite revealing in the sense that it showed how far what progress had been made. Especially papers from France were very, very interesting. The Russian papers were there, but half the sense was, well, I wouldn't say half. You lost a lot in the translation. But they're very good papers. The spirit was also one of openness. The 58 conference, there was a tremendous number of papers, etc. There was, you might say, an explosion of information. But the one after that, I think that was in 64, the information flow started petering out. So that is how it was.
Can I just ask you again, how much did you learn from the Soviet? Did you understand much of what the Soviet scientists were saying at the first conference?
Well, you saw it through the, you heard it through the translator, and it was quite difficult, quite difficult. We visited the Soviet Union immediately after the conference. Dr. Baba led a delegation, and we went around a good bit of the USSR. They were advanced, but not that advanced, let's put it that way. We had different ideas on health and safety, for instance. That was one. As far as their technology went, I must say that it was impeccable. There's no doubt about it. They knew what they were doing. Of course, those days everything was small, nothing on a gigantic scale, and anyway you were shown only a few things. That's to be expected.
How far along was the Indian program at this time? I'm sorry.
Things are coming undone.
Atmosphere among the Indian nuclear scientists in particular in this early period, nuclear scientists and engineers?
It was a very, very small group and a very cohesive group, and sort of, when you start something new, you're always on the go trying to get things done, etc. In those days, up till 55, we were just setting up all our analytical facilities, etc. In 55, we took a decision after the conference to start the Apsara, that is the pool-type reactor. At the same time, from the USSR, we moved to Canada for the Canada-India reactor, Cyrus, as it is called now. And we had discussions with the Canadian AECL, with Lorne Gray, with whom I still correspond, Dr. Lewis, and that whole lot, Bennett, WB. So it was a very, very exciting time of, shall we say, exponential growth. Very interesting, and what should I say, a very everybody was working very, very closely, no problems.
Can you tell me a little bit about Dr. Baba and what his role was in the early program?
Well, he is the man who was the, what shall I say, the main pillar and the source of inspiration. He at times overextended us because we were the fellows who had to deliver the goods, but he listened to reason, and I must say he backed us up 101%. We never had any problems to speak of. Very occasional, some little bit or the other, but on the whole it's very, very smooth sailing. He is the one who would see to it we got our proper funding, that our projects went through, and we didn't have the usual government red tape to deal with. Otherwise, I don't think we would ever have started, because all governments are the same, and our government, especially in those days, was very, very bureaucratic, highly bureaucratic. So he sort of, what you might call in American football, was the fellow who ran interference.
You can tell me about Pandit Nehru's views about nuclear energy in this early phase.
Panditji was a person who firmly believed in science and technology. But he had one reservation as far as nuclear energy went, and that is it should be used only, and repeat, only for peaceful purposes. And that was clearly defined. In fact, our Atomic Energy Act has a clause in it, probably one of the first ones. I don't know whether the others have it or not. I think one or two others have it, but we were the first ones. Our act says that nuclear energy, as far as India is concerned, shall be used only for peaceful purposes. I mean, that is laid down. Now, we've been accused of all sorts of things since then, and I think we have stuck to that so far, and I'm sure we will stick to it.
Can I ask you again to summarize Pandit Nehru's views on nuclear energy?
He looked upon it as a tool to introduce the toiling masses of India into the 20th century, to improve the lot of the common man by, shall we say, energy per se. We are very, very short of it. We still are. Then its use in agriculture, its use in medicine, and the fallout which you get, not the nuclear fallout, but the scientific fallout you get from using nuclear techniques in other branches of science and technology. This was his main objective.
Was he supportive of Dr. Bhabha in these early days?
Oh yes, extremely. Always was supportive, right to the very end. There's no doubt about that. Very supportive. And so was Shastri, and so was Mrs. Gandhi. And I'm sure so is Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, though I haven't had the pleasure of working under him.
Can you tell us something about the negotiations for the Trombe reactor, of which you were very much part?
Which one? The Apsara?
The Cyrus reactor.
Cyrus, oh. There we had discussions with the Canadian aid people, because this was to come under Canadian aid to India. The leading person on the Canadian side was Lorne Gray, J.L. Gray, who subsequently became the president of AECL. He is the man who what shall I say, started the ball rolling, an extremely competent engineer and a very fine human being. The question was, what would we do in India and what would Canada supply? One of the arguments which we had was on the fuel, the metal fuel, and we were told that, this is a highly sophisticated industry, that the technology is very, very, very difficult to master, etc., etc. But Dr. Bhabha took the view that it had to be done sometime or the other. So we broke it up into parts. It was first to make the metal, and second, convert the metal to fuel elements. I had the fortunate task, let's say, of coordinating the metal production as well as the fuel production. It wasn't that difficult as was made out by the Canadians. I mean, yes, it took us a couple of months longer than what we had planned, but otherwise there was no problem. Right from the word go, the fuel elements were absolutely okay, and they were the ones which went into the reactor, 50% Indian and 50% Canadian. And they worked.
Can you tell me to what extent India was dependent on foreign assistance at this point?
Well, let's put it this way, that the Cyrus, the Canada-India reactor, did give us a methodology of working to nuclear standards. Otherwise, it would have taken us longer. It merely, what shall I say, compressed the time which was required by us to move further along the way. But otherwise, it was our own effort, completely our own effort.
Did India benefit in any way from Atoms for Peace?
Oh yes, because it opened our eyes to what was going on in the rest of the world, and it gave us fresh impetus, you might say, and to which direction to look in, what would suit our conditions, and how far we could go. The last point being the most important, because in '58 we took the decision to set up a fuel reprocessing plant, plutonium plant. I don't know whether you've been to Trombe, it's there at the very end.
Stop you a second, because that was my next. Okay. Can I ask you, can you recall why the decision was taken in I think it was 58, I have,
58.
To build a reprocessing facility at Trombe?
Well, we had to store those rods, the irradiated fuel, or what should we do with them? The second thing was that we were already thinking in terms of setting up a fast breeder reactor. These are things which had come out in the 55 conference, the EBR, the American EBR, etc. The Russians had put forward some papers. So the idea was, let's see if we can extract plutonium from the irradiated fuel. In 58, we took the decision, that was conveyed to me when I was in Geneva, and told that as soon as I came back, I would have to start working on it, which we did. And I think that the plant was, the first fuel element went in 1963 or 64. The reprocessing plant started. It worked very well, I must say. We made a couple of errors, but they were not very, what shall I say, costly, in the sense that we could handle them ourselves. We didn't require any outside assistance to set it right. And this worked.
Just to sum up this whole early period, it seems like there was a whole bank of information and know-how that India already had at this stage. And if you can just summarize it for me, the people, the...
Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry. No, I wouldn't say that. For instance, the data which was available for reprocessing, available in literature, was totally incorrect. I can assure you, if we had followed that data, nothing would have worked. Let's be frank about it. So we had to generate our own data, which we did. As far as to go back earlier, when we made the metal also, we had to generate our own data. We had to build it up. Where we did profit was from methods of analysis to find out the parts per million and parts per billion. What is the methods of analysis one uses? But the process itself, the setting up of plants, etc., was entirely an Indian effort. We got a window, yes, this is how things are done, but then we were on our own. We had to do it ourselves. You couldn't get that type of information naturally. I don't blame people for not giving it to anyone.
And just to repeat that point that Nehru was supportive again, are you okay on the light? You okay? Okay. Just to repeat the point that that the Prime Minister was supportive at the time, if you can just go over that.
Yes, when this decision for the reprocessing plant was taken, I think that the cost of the plant was some 4 crores of rupees, which is a lot of money, especially in those days. And what one might say, one had never seen what plutonium looked like, what were the intermediate compounds which we were looking for looked like. So it was a pretty, what shall I say, risky decision to be taken by Pandit Nehru. But he took it, and I think it was the right decision at that time. He had faith in the people who were going to handle this project.
Can I just ask you to summarize how and why the decision was taken not to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty? What were the problems for India in that treaty?
Well, it's totally, you see, look, I'll put it this way. The basis of that treaty is, to put it quite bluntly, you do what I tell you to do, but don't do what I do. Now, it's totally unacceptable. If, however, the first portions of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, that is included in the preamble, which says you will go in for nuclear disarmament and all that type of stuff, could, with some semblance, I'm not saying do it 100%, but at least some steps in that direction could be implemented, you can talk about it. There's no such thing. I mean, I don't see, since the time this treaty was put up for signature by various countries, that there has been any reduction in the nuclear arms race. I mean, everybody seems to be going flat out to see how many people they can kill in one go.
India chose not to sign NPT. What were the main reasons?
Well, it's an unequal treaty, as I said. As has been said. All right, sorry.
Not refer back.
All right. It's a. We have always emphasized that it is a treaty which is totally unequal. That is, doesn't treat everybody equally. The basic principle in that treaty is that you do what I tell you to do, but don't do what I do. Now, if there was any question, if there was some indication even that you are going to reduce nuclear arms, which is there in the preamble to the treaty, one could look at it. The second point is that you have divided the world into people who are the haves and the have-nots. What are you looking at? Whether I am doing something peacefully, you want to inspect. But if you are preparing for war, you need not inspect. This seems to me to be somewhat an incongruous situation. Of course, nobody will agree with me in quite a few countries of the world. But the fact remains that supposing tomorrow, by a dictum, you say that all nuclear activities listed below shall move to the military, then there are no safeguards. The safeguards cease automatically. There is no question of safeguards. Now, to me it seems rather peculiar that what you're exactly trying to achieve, what you don't want to achieve, that is to move everything into the military field.
We're going to move on to 1974. I'm just going to wait for the gentleman in the background to just walk through, if he would. Just a second. Can you tell me the background to how the decision was made to go ahead with the PNE in 1974?
Well, 1974, well, we wanted an experiment, to tell you the truth. It was an experiment because when you look at what has happened since 1974 and now it's 1987.
Oh, I'm sorry, can we just keep it in the time frame?
All right, only 74.
Your memories of 74.
Okay, fine. Right. So 74 was purely an experiment, as I called it, a peaceful nuclear experiment. We wanted to see whether we were capable of carrying out such an experiment, and the results are there. We are capable. That's all. I mean, people try to read a bit too much into it, and I don't think one should. One should leave it at what it is. The future will prove whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong.
People always ask the question, why 1974? Because India had the possibility way back in 56, 57, when you actually had gone ahead with, I'm sorry, 66, when you actually had got the available plutonium. They always say, why 74? Why the timing? Oh, just a minute. We've got a whole... What are your memories of the ceremonial opening of the Saras reactor?
Oh, it was a big affair. We had scientists from all over the world, because Canada had a very strong contingent, naturally. But I think it was Sir John Cockcroft who came from Britain, a few others. From the US, we had the US AEC, the chairman and the members. In fact, from all over the world there were people. In those days, the Atomic Energy Commissions were sort of a club de sans club. That is to say, you all sort of work together, use the same language, and you are all for each other, whether it be US or India or anybody else. You all work together. It has changed since then. Competition has increased. Problems have increased.
Stop, Beth. Can you go and tell these guys?
Okay, or not?
Okay.
18 months.
Let me ask. What's that? Following the Chinese test, Dr. Barber made an announcement that India could produce a bomb within 18 months. Do you recall at this stage any discussions about this?
Let's put it this way. That let's talk about numbers. 18 months was a fair period because we already had the raw materials with us. It could have been done, I think. It could have been. it would be a pretty tough schedule, but it could have been done. It was a lot easier later on.
How much progress was there in the Indian nuclear program while Shastri was in office?
He was there for a very short time, you know. It was during this time that the plutonium plant started working. Cyrus operation became normal. We had certain problems with Cyrus in the sense that there was some algae growth. You had to kill the algae, etc. You know, set everything right and all that. Therefore, you might say those were the two milestones when he was the prime minister. He was a very direct sort of a person, but a very nice man. Very nice man. He was a bit, what shall we say, economical as far as expenditure goes. Let's put it that way.
Could you share any of his views on nuclear energy and nuclear programs in general?
Well, he's the first prime minister who said that if required, we will go in for the other side of nuclear technology. Let's put it that way. Or words to that effect.
Now I'm going to get back to 1974 now. Though in the just before the P&E in 74, there were leading scientists, I understand, who were arguing in favour of the nuclear option. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but I'll just put it the other way to you. You are mixing up an experiment, an explosive experiment, you might say, with a weapon system. I mean, these are two completely different things. See, if you look at the world, countries which are nuclear power, who have weapons, have always got a fairly substantial enrichment program. So till you talk about enrichment, and this is the high enriched stuff, till you do that, you shouldn't talk about any weapon systems.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. Can you explain to me technically, oh wait a minute, he's still there, I'm sorry. Can you explain for the lay audience, because this is one of the misconceptions that people have, what the difference is between that P&E and a bomb?
A P&E can lead to a bomb. Well, let's be frank about that. But when you're talking about a weapon has to satisfy many conditions. One is the size, the shape, the portability, and the ability to, what shall we say, to drop it on target. Now, whilst an explosive device, you don't have to worry about any of those things because it's a static thing. You push it underground and then you fire it in a normal way. Now, there it's much more sophisticated. It requires inputs which you would normally put into any weapon. I mean, whether it be a rifle or ammunition or a conventional bomb or anything, there are certain military specifications which you don't have to bother about as far as a P&E is concerned.
Can you explain what India actually did in 1974 for a lay audience, for a non-scientific audience? What actually took place?
All right, I'll put it very, very simply. We dug a hole in the desert, we pushed this device inside, and then we fired it. Very simple, just 3 sentences. But it required a lot of planning to get the right geological strata, to see that there was no venting, because that would create problems with everybody, our neighbors and ourselves also. And you might say the sheer logistics of it, to operate in a desert-like area is no joke, I can assure you. It's difficult.
And what did the test what did the explosion achieve?
Well, we got some interesting data on the it gave us interesting data insofar as monitoring of tests is concerned. That's the first one. on the geological formations in and around India, because the way in which the waves travel to your seismic stations, and also finally that we could do things which we wanted to do, if we wanted to do it.
I'm really not. The one other thing that people always ask is why there were no follow-up tests. It's always been a mystery to people why there were no follow-ups.
We're not interested in weaponry. If we were interested in weaponry, we would do it, but we are not. And do you see, let's put it the other way, that if a country wishes to go in for weaponry, and I think any country would be crazy to go in for that unless you're very, very rich, you have to cut down somewhere. I mean, it's not something which comes to you on a platter, that you have enough funds available, that you can have both conventional and nuclear forces. And if you have nuclear force, you cut down on the conventional, fine, but then you'll never use that nuclear force. You'll be crazy if you're going to use it. So why go in for it? Why make an investment of several thousand crores of rupees for something which you know you're not going to use and which you cannot use? So it's absurd to even think along those lines. That's my view, and always has been that view. It has never changed.
The time of the explosion, where were you and what were your feelings when the explosion took place?
Well, I was there at the site, and it was a sense of relief. That's all, that it's all over now. Now to answer the questions when I get back. And that was the only problem. Beyond that, nothing else.
Did you encounter any problems in the test or in the explosion?
Nothing to speak of. Very minor things, you know. Because even though it's a desert, there were a lot of deer on that area. You cannot believe it. They were about this much, very long, and they used to move all over the place. So to clear that so that they don't get hurt or anything of the kind, that took some doing, you might say. But beyond that, nothing. No ecological damage, let's put it that way.
Final question on that. Why the 10-year wait? Assuming that you had enough.
Oh. I don't know. I wasn't the chairman. I became chairman in 72, you know. 66 to 72, I was the director of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. I suppose, we do make suggestions and they either accept it or reject it. When they accept it, we do it. When we don't accept it, we don't. That's all.
Anything else on Mrs. Gandhi's attitude to nuclear energy? Was she also supportive of?
Extremely supportive. A very nice person, if I might say so. Very human. Very, very human.
What were India's energy requirements in the early 70s? What was it you said?
I'll put it, you see, you take this state for a change. It's about the size of, what shall we say, Italy, a bit bigger than Italy. I don't know what our population is, but it's something frightening. Yes, we produce roughly 4,000 or 5,000 megawatts of power is the installed capacity. But we run our industry, and our industry consumes something like 70% of our electrical energy. We run it, let's say, in a staggered fashion. Not all factories close over the weekend or on Sundays. Everybody has a weekly off, but that's a rotating off. So somebody's factory is shut on a Wednesday, somebody else is on a Monday, and the lucky one's on a Sunday. So there is, if you work as you do in the United States or in Europe or anywhere else, there is even in this state, which they say is a surplus state, a shortage of power. I don't think that we'll be able to achieve a comfortable, I'm saying a word comfortable means everybody shutting on the same day and all that type of stuff, till the year 2000 or probably beyond that. We won't be able to achieve that target at all. We'll have to go on this basis of having, what shall I say, marginal shortages and big shortages in some part of India or the other.
Do you remember the criticism that was levelled at India during the Carter period? What, you were chairman, you must have been taking a lot of the flak.
Oh yeah, I did take a lot of the flak. But then, you see, you got to look, you have to look at your own country first and then bother about the rest. And I looked at my own country, so it was just too bad.
What effect did the Carter legislation have on?
Well, you know, I don't know whether you read the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Non-Proliferation Treaty of the United States. There is one clause in it, now I forget because, you know, for 3 years I haven't even looked at it, which is, to my way of thinking, somewhat skewed. It says that on a presidential determination, I'm not quoting exact.
Let me ask you about the time, though, how the program was affected. I'm thinking of the Tarapur.
Oh yes, it was affected, and
what was it like to be at the receiving end?
Tough. That's about all one. But one had to grin and bear it. I mean, there's very little you can do about it. I mean, you're not, what shall we say, you relied on an agreement which had the force of a treaty, because Tarapur agreement lay on the floor of the House as far as the US is concerned, and then it was approved. So it has the force of a treaty. Now, all right, so you want to break it, you break it. What else can we do about it?
Can you explain why India thought the US had broken, or considered that they had broken the agreement? Can you just explain that, the Indian perspective on that?
Well, suppose you have an agreement which has the force of a treaty.
Can I ask you about that particular agreement?
Yes, that Tarapur agreement was till, I think, 1990 something or the other. And the US was to supply all the requirements of Tarapur for fuel as well as the spare parts which are required for the running of the reactor, for the safe running of the reactor. And India on its part shall buy the enrichment from no other country except the US, and India will buy all the raw material, all the spare parts, etc., also from the US. Now this was a perfectly sort of, what shall I say, straightforward agreement where there was a mutuality of interests. All of a sudden you say, sorry, but I can't do it. All right. So you got to start scurrying around, and it was quite a problem to get alternate supplies, to make arrangements for spare parts, etc. It was quite a job. In a way, we started to sort of look upon Tarapur also as an Indian reactor, an Indian-built reactor, and we jolly well had to do quite a few of the things in India, and I think it was in that way it was a good thing. It increased our nuclear capability, if to put it in the American way.
Let's stop there. How much have we got on this tape? Okay, you were chairman of the Indian Atomic Energy Commission at the time that the London Club was meeting.
Yes.
What was your perception of what they were doing?
Well, it was like a cartel, you know, like what OPEC was when they put the squeeze on everybody as far as the price of oil was concerned. At least there you could get the oil, provided you had the money to pay for it. Here it was sort of a blank embargo that until unless you did this, you wouldn't get any supplies. There was also what is called a trigger list. That means certain things could not be obtained from abroad, certain technologies could not be obtained from abroad. But by that time we had advanced enough, and except for a very short period, I don't think, well, it did affect us in the sense it did delay us, but effect wasn't a disastrous thing. We had to shut down everything, etc. We had to change. That's all we had to do.
Just wait for this man to go around the back. I think there were various efforts made during the Carter period to control what he saw as proliferation. One was this International Nuclear Fuel Cycle Evaluation Group. What did you think it was? What was it achieving?
It was achieving absolutely nothing. It merely created a scare in the US that you should not have reprocessing in the States, therefore anywhere else in the world. We went ahead with our plans. We think that, I like the way in which I say we, no, India thought that the best way of containing nuclear waste is to separate the valuable stuff, which is the plutonium, the remnants of the uranium, from the fission products. And as far as fission products were concerned, you could handle them in the form of glassified material, for which a plant was set up in Tarapur. I think it's still working. The which to our way of thinking is about the best way to handle nuclear waste. Then you got a segregation. Now Carter thought that from power reactors, the plutonium you got could be used for making weapons. Well, if you are as sophisticated as the United States of America, yes, but no country in the world has reached those peaks. Let's face it. And therefore, the only use you could make of that plutonium was to push it back into a fast reactor, fast breeder reactor, and generate electricity from it, which was our idea. These things happen, you know. Politicians usually have some ideas which are not necessarily those which others may have.
So what do you think he achieved? Do you think he managed to achieve?
He managed to put a full stop as far as nuclear energy is concerned in most parts of the world. Because whatever the US thinks today, the rest of the world does tomorrow. You know, you people, when you get a sneeze, the rest of the world gets influenza.
All right, now let's just, if we can talk about Pakistan just briefly. You were the chairman of the Indian Atomic Energy Commission at the time that the news was filtering out about the Kahuta plant. What was your reaction to that news?
Well, I only knew what I read in the papers as far as Pakistan was concerned.
Let me ask you, were there many concerns in India?
Yeah, there are among certain people.
Were there concerns at that time? If I can ask you about that time.
Yeah, that, you see, after all, you need enrichment when you have a reactor which is going to use it. Otherwise, why should you have enrichment? At least India can say we're going to put it into Tarapur, or we're going to put it in the fast breeder at Kalpakam. So we've got two options where we can use enriched uranium. The low enriched stuff into Tarapur, the high enriched into the fast breeder at Kalpakam. But here they don't have any use for it. And I don't intend to comment on it either.
They do say they're building. They do say that they're...
Well, I have some views. Let's put it that way. Which may not agree with the rest. Or which may agree with the rest. I don't know.
Would you share them? Would you share them?
No. I'm out of this racket, thank God.
Do you think that Pakistan does have the bomb?
Difficult to say. Very difficult to say. But it has played its cards in this business very well. Because, you know, it's got it and it hasn't got it. So people sort of bend over backwards to keep them pacified and all that type of stuff. Whether they have it or not, I don't know. I've never been there to Pakistan since partition. Last time I was in Karachi was in, when was it? 47. Passed through Karachi. I haven't been there since.
Let me ask you another sort of science question, another layman's question. Can you explain very simply for us the technology required to make the bomb and how it differs from that used to generate electric power? And I realise you've been through it a little bit, but if you can just explain it one more time.
Well, if you can control the release of energy in an orderly and safe fashion, you can produce energy which can be converted into electricity. If, however, you do it without any form of control, then you have a weapon on your hands, essentially. This is the basic thing. And you can, let me put it this way, that it's pretty difficult to get a reactor to explode as far as nuclear portion of it is concerned. It may explode due to other reasons, like the problems you had in Chernobyl. But you can't get it to explode. It's impossible.
How do you physically build a bomb?
Oh, you slap the metal together, then you put what is called explosives or lenses, and then you have a neutron source, and you see that the whole thing goes off together simultaneously in less than 1,000th of a second. And then you run like anything so that you're nowhere near it. No, I don't know much No, I wouldn't put it that way. Um, uh, I would say that if you are interested, if a country is interested in the bomb, then I think that the country should have a very, very close look at the causes which have brought it to a stage when it takes such a peculiar decision. I firmly believe that you should not even think about it, to tell you the truth.
There are a lot of people who are concerned about the distribution of plutonium around the world, and obviously you can say that India has concentrated her efforts on producing plutonium for the fast breeders. Do you see it as a possibility that one's opening oneself to terrorists, like accessibility to terrorism?
Yeah, let's put it this way, that not that the terrorists will be able to assemble a device or a weapon, because if you got stuff coming out, plutonium coming out from a power reactor, I don't think any terrorist is that good to be able to make a device or anything of the kind. But they can use it as a spread of radioactivity. You know, after all, the lethal dose is roughly 1/1,000,000th of a gram per adult if you ingest it completely, and you really get into trouble. But otherwise, plutonium per se, from a power reactor, you can't use it for a weapon. Definitely not. Unless you are at the stage of the United States. I understand the US has carried out some experiments on it. All right, more power to them. That's all.
Do you think that nuclear proliferation is something that can be controlled?
Yes, nuclear proliferation of weaponry, let's put it that way, can be controlled provided the big boys make up their mind to come down and de-escalate. But if they're going to talk about, well, you got 20,000, I got 19,000, so I make 1,000 more, then the fellow says, no, I'll make 22, so this will also go, then you can never control it. Never. And I think it's crazy, because if these things are let off, I don't think that there'll be anything left of what we call civilization. We'll be back again to the Stone Age, if there's anything left. If. And that too I doubt. It's not merely going to be the two superpowers and their allies, but it's going to be everybody else. You're not going to be able to control that, look, this is the belt which is going to be destroyed, and this belt is okay. It'll be the world. It's too small. We're too small for this type of, what shall I say, this type of play or these type of games. It's absurd, absolutely.
How do you envision the next 10, 15 years of the nuclear age?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. It will all depend upon the leadership of the United States, very frankly. What it thinks. How is it going to get over the energy problem? I mean, you achieved a lot by conservation. You achieved a lot by other means, but eventually you're still going to need power. You can talk about solar energy, you can talk about wind energy, you can talk about geothermal energy. But where you need big chunks for manufacturing activities, you'll have to go for sources of electricity which are in a condensed form, like coal, oil, natural gas, and therefore nuclear. Let that time come when you start getting brownouts, then they'll start thinking differently. That's what I say. It's purely a question of economics, look at life. Of course, one has to say also from the nuclear viewpoint that one has to be safe to the extent possible. There's nothing like absolute safety. I mean, I don't think one can achieve absolute safety, but you have to be as safe as possible.
How many countries do you think have the capability to build nuclear weapons?
Difficult to say. But amongst I'm sure Israel has it. There's no doubt about it. Probably South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, Pakistan, so I understand. Of course, Japan, Germany, etc. are there always. I'm not talking about the countries of Europe or Japan. Japan, of course, is a very highly advanced country, but they have their, what shall I say, it's one of the few countries in the world which has an outlook, which is a national outlook. It's not confined merely to a small group, which is dead against that, and it's more power to them. That's all I could say.
In all the time that you were chairman of the Indian Atomic Energy Commission, what was the highest point for you in all your memory?
I don't know. All of it was fun. Except when you get clobbered by the press.